School is the one place where I'm completely lost.
Schools could do a much better job
In
of building
school,
a
you
community.
need to
It
build.
feels like I'm always doing wrong and feeling bad.
I feel invisible. I really like my one teacher. She's
Some teachers are understanding.
My teachers recognize I
He
have
helped me
learning
get an
issues.
assessment.
I don't want to go to school anymore
Bullied.
after being bullied at school.
There's bullying.
Failed 2
I
classes
don't feel
right after
welcome.
the assault.
We don't all come from stable homes.
Welcome to the School Attendance Review podcast, where we talk about the Yukon education system, the school attendance review done by the Child and Youth Advocate Office, and how that review relates to what's happening right now for Yukon students. All right, so I'm here for episode 3, Belonging and Culture, with Christopher C. from the Child and Youth Advocate Office. Christopher is the Systemic Advocacy Analyst and was also one of the leads on the putting together the school attendance review. So welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Maxime. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Me too. And so let's start off with what is meant by that belonging and culture theme?
Well, one of the, it's a big question, obviously, but one of the key findings that we were hearing when we were chatting with students, teachers, parents, elders and other folks involved in the Yukon educational ecosystem was just a general feeling of the school not being a welcoming environment, right? Where students were not coming in to this place where they, are spending 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years of their life, hopefully. And they weren't coming to these places and feeling welcomed and like they could be their full selves. Right now, this isn't every student, of course, right? But a lot of the students we spoke to for this review, Indigenous students, queer students, other minority or marginalized students of some kind, talked about how the classroom was not a safe place for them. They didn't feel like they could be themselves, didn't feel like they could be free to express their opinions or their values or their culture or their identity. And that's just heartbreaking to hear when you are considering that students need to be in a place of comfort to be able to feel empowered to learn, empowered to take control of their own learning, and to be invested in their own educational journey, so to speak.
Sure.
So that was one of the real devastating findings for us and showed that we have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
And, empowered to learn, and let alone literally just able to learn.
Oh,
like
100%.
we know you're not able to learn if you're not feeling safe and leaving a huge part of yourself at the door.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
When students come to school, they're not just coming as students, right? We aren't robots. We're human beings, right? So students are coming with, everything that happened at home, everything that happened, the night before at the community center, everything that happened at hockey practice or, on the bus on the way to school or whatever, right? And so when we are, and this is something we saw and heard from representatives of the education department, is that, school is a place of learning and, it's academics only. And that actually doesn't fit with what's happening in real life for these kids.
Yeah. So what are some of the other findings that came from the review about belonging and culture?
Just, the ones that really surfaced most prominently was just feelings of alienation and disengagement in schools. And also that the programming, the curriculum, the way things were taught wasn't necessarily always relevant or useful for a lot of young people's lives, that they didn't have positive relationships with their educators.
Right. And so I know some of the recommendations, like you touched on, are around bringing in First Nations cultural values into the education system for everybody as a whole, and the benefits of that for teaching and educating humans holistically rather than just spewing curriculum at them.
Well, that's
right?
I love that you bring that point up, because that's what meaningful representation actually is, right? A lot of people want to conflate, token inclusion with representation. You point to the lonely only on your school staff or in your boardroom and be like, well, look, we've included these people.
The lonely only,
right?
Yeah. I haven't heard that term before.
But it's still within a system that is unchallenged, right? The dominant system, the colonial system.
Yeah.
Right. So what meaningful representation actually looks like is not just meaning you have indigenous teachers or Filipino teachers or queer teachers, but like that worldviews and cultures and values are infused into
the culture of the
exactly
thing. Yeah. It's not the lonely only. It's not checking the box. It's actually
Absolutely.
trying to change the culture
absolutely
of the place, the workplace, the school environment, everything.
Yeah, there you go.
And so can you talk a bit more about the recommendations that came out of the review and for belonging and culture?
So if you look in our school attendance review, the first 7 recommendations of our 14 recommendations, so a good half of them, have to do with the ideas of belonging, safety, and school culture. Right. And so those centered around enhancing an inclusive, participatory, and respectful school environment for all people involved in that, not just students, right, but educators, CLCs, ESWs, administrators, parents, families, elders, everyone, right?
Yeah.
It looked like creating partnerships with First Nation governments and the YFNED, which is the First Nations Education Directorate here in the Yukon, to increase First Nation representation, again, meaningful representation in schools, and incorporating First Nations mentors and elders and teachings and knowledge into school curriculum and the training of educators, right? And another key piece was that recognizing, again, that academic success and academics in general looks bigger than just sitting in the classroom facing the whiteboard 1, 2, 3 ABC, right? But what we heard from a lot of students and elders and First Nations community members was the idea that our on the land learning, our culture camps, our fish camps, and spending time with family, spending time with elders, learning traditional knowledge was not necessarily always acknowledged or recognized as academic programming, right? And so what happens is then you'd have a kid who would take a couple weeks off to go to their family's hunt camp and then come back and then
get penalized for it.
The 2 weeks shows up as unexcused absence or this, that, and the other, right? And not only is that child now behind according to the school's idea of progress, but then they've also been, the messaging there that they've been told, the underlying messaging is that what they just did is not valuable in the eyes of the dominant system.
Yeah.
Right. And that has massive ramifications for sense of identity and sense of self-confidence.
For sure.
And pride in one's culture.
Yeah. Right? And so I wanted to talk about, there's been a lot of developments in the last 3 years, right? Since that review 3 years ago. How have things evolved at the YCAO in terms of that belonging and culture theme? What kind of stories are you hearing from young people in the community, and what have you been working on?
Well, I think you've seen shifts. I won't say that they're massive, but you've seen, attempts from different schools and educators to try it. It does feel like the education department is aware now that things need to change. And so they are making efforts. I would say the efforts often have not resulted necessarily in tangible actions just yet. And I want to, I do want to acknowledge that, large scale systemic change is not like turning a canoe. It's more like turning a cruise ship. And also, how are we supporting these students in the immediate? Right. And in the immediate, we can say that we continue to see, referrals of students who are experiencing racism, experiencing senses of unsafety in the schools. But, one of the more recent developments that's really come out of this is that Chiefs Commission on Education and the First Nation Education Commission actually approached YFNED to launch a review on systemic racism and discrimination in the school system. right? And so YFNAD approached us and asked us if we would partner with them on it. And so that's currently the big review that our office is undertaking.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on over the next year. We hope to have a final report out by the spring of next year, 2025, that is able to, really compile some of these stories of students and educators and families and educational support workers from throughout the territory. And then through the review itself and the knowledge we're able to gather from people who contribute their stories is to be able to, yes, identify trends, and through those trends and patterns be able to come up with some recommendations that we can offer to the education department here in the Yukon to hopefully inform some meaningful change moving forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Chris, for being here with us and trying to cram a really big topic into a small amount of time.
Yeah, thanks, Maxime. Thanks for the chat. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's awesome getting your insight. You being so involved and close to these reviews, it's great to hear it directly from you. So next episode, we're going to be talking about 2 big key findings: mental health and trauma, and personal factors. So looking forward to having you there.